In a city where dinner can cost more than a month's rent, and a worn-out coat is enough to erase your humanity. A single moment, a glance, a plate, a mistake can tear down everything we think we know about someone. This is the story of a man the world forgot, and a daughter who never stopped remembering. Stay with us. You're about to see what happens when dignity is reclaimed, in the most unexpected way. If stories like this move you, if you believe in second chances and unseen heroes, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to uncover, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Asterisk, the city was buzzing with its usual split-screen contradictions. On one side of Main Street, a Bentley purred smoothly into a valet spot in front of Lucien's, an opulent French fusion restaurant, where tablecloths were starched into folds sharper than most men's suits. On the other, 2 blocks down, a man in a wheelchair tried to coax his old Labrador up the curb while pedestrians veered around them like potholes on a rainy road. It was late afternoon. Golden sunlight streamed through glass towers and hit the windows of Lucien's just right, turning the wine glasses into prisms and the mahogany tables into altars. Inside, servers floated like dancers, rehearsed in the art of silent elegance, while soft jazz and foreign accents danced on the white noise of wealth. No one ever really noticed anything here until something disturbed the choreography. Outside, on the terrace where potted trees shielded patrons from eye contact with reality, sat a man. He wore a faded coat, the kind with buttons missing and threads escaping like secrets too long kept. His shoes had surrendered their shine years ago. A gray beanie was folded carefully in his lap. He looked down at the menu that had fallen out, his feet not daring to touch it. He wasn't speaking, wasn't begging, wasn't doing anything except sitting. And yet, somehow, his presence screamed too loud for this silent place. A waiter passed by. He didn't say a word, just let his eyes trail from the man's coat to his shoes to the corner of the terrace where security cameras surely blinked with quiet panic. 30 seconds later, the manager emerged, a thin man with slick hair and a smile like dry paper. "I'm sorry, sir," the manager said in a voice loud enough for the nearest table to pause chewing. "This is a fine establishment. If you're seeking donations, there's a Mission 2 blocks over." The man didn't flinch. He simply blinked, looked down again. The manager leaned forward slightly. "I'll have to ask you to leave. If not, we'll involve hotel security." A couple nearby whispered, their forkful of seared scallops forgotten. The woman pulled her coat tighter, as if poverty was contagious. A man in a tailored blazer muttered, "This is exactly what's wrong with the city." "Still," the man said. Nothing. He didn't stand, didn't beg. He simply was. And that more than anything seemed to unsettle them. Then something shifted. The restaurant doors opened with a gentle whoosh, letting in the scent of truffle oil and tension. Out stepped a woman in a tailored navy suit, heels clicking against the tile like a gavel on Judgment Day. She was young, mid-30s perhaps, but her posture carried the certainty of someone who had learned early how to take up space that didn't want her. Her skin was the color of morning coffee with too much cream, her hair pulled back in a braid that hinted at a military precision. She stopped, she stared, and then she said, softly, as if air had betrayed her, "Dad?" The terrace froze. Manager turned pale. The server who had passed earlier stiffened. Even the murmuring diners went quiet, caught between shame and curiosity. The woman, Alani, didn't care. She dropped to her knees, her designer bag forgotten, her phone clattering against the tile. "Dad," she said again, tears welling like secrets set free. "It's me. It's Alina. Don't you remember?" The man blinked, slowly, as if time had thickened around him. Then his hand reached out, worn and trembling, and closed around hers. "I remember," he said, voice gravel thin. "I remember those eyes. and for a moment, the world outside Lucien's disappeared. It was just the two of them, father and daughter reunited not by fate, but by resilience. By love that had waited quietly, patiently, beneath layers of dust and disappointment. The manager coughed awkwardly. "Ma'am, is this gentleman with you?" Alina looked up, not angrily, but with a kind of cold clarity that only pain can forge. "He's not with me," she said. "He is me." The people nearby looked away, some out of guilt, some out of habit. One man tapped his glass nervously. A woman whispered something about calling the valet early, but others watched how she stood and helped him up, watched how she brushed invisible dust from his coat and took his arm as if it were made of gold, not threadbare fabric. Watched how she didn't apologize, didn't lower her voice, didn't pretend he wasn't hers, and for once, even Lucien's didn't know what to do with that kind of truth. Later, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and bathed the terrace in warm amber light, a child waiting outside with her parents pointed at the man and whispered, "Is he famous?" Her mother shook her head, then hesitated, looked back at him, at the beanie in his lap, the quiet dignity in his silence. "Maybe," she murmured. "Maybe he is." Everything around them faded. The murmur of expensive conversations, the faint clink of silverware against porcelain, the passing glances of strangers, all of it dissolved into the background like fog lifting from a morning street. In that moment, Alina's world narrowed to the weathered man before her. Her knees pressed against the stone tiles of the terrace, her hand resting in his like something long lost, finally returned. He didn't flinch when she touched him, his fingers rough and cold wrapped gently around hers. There was a quiet tremble, but not from fear, from something deeper, recognition. His gaze moved slowly, as if waking from a long sleep, first to her face, then to her eyes. "Ben Kang. En Chun Kan Sao?" She had whispered in Vietnamese out of instinct, then switched quickly. "It's me, Dad. It's Alina." His brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in concentration, like he was reaching across a vast distance inside his mind, trying to find something buried under years of silence. Then his cracked lips moved. "I remember those eyes." 3 simple words. And yet they split the air like thunder. Tears rolled down her cheeks, smudging the soft makeup she had so carefully applied that morning for her meeting with Lucien's board. It didn't matter now. Nothing mattered but this. He remembered her eyes. He remembered her dot. The waiter stood frozen a few feet away, holding a linen napkin like it might somehow fix the discomfort in the air. The manager, once so smug and self-assured, now hovered at the entrance like a student who knew he'd just failed a moral test. Alina stood slowly, still holding her father's hand. "Dad, it's really me. I found you. I thought I was going crazy. I've looked everywhere." Her voice cracked on the last word. Do you know where you've been?" James Carter blinked again, his mind moving like a boat through thick fog. "I've been walking," he said simply. "Then sitting. Mostly sitting. Some churches, some shelters, not much more." He sounded tired, but not broken. In fact, there was something strangely steady in his voice. Not weak, not pitiful, just honest. He wasn't ashamed of where he'd been, but he didn't expect to be seen anymore. Not like this. Alina helped him up, slipping her arm under his. He stood with more effort than she remembered, but his back still carried a certain straightness, like some part of his past identity still clung to him. The man who once ran a kitchen with military precision. The man who taught her how to slice carrots with the rhythm of jazz. The man who, even after her mother died, still made pancakes every Sunday morning. "Come inside with me," she said softly. He shook his head. "No," he murmured. "Too many ghosts in there." She understood instantly. Lucien's had once been his. Not just his name on a plaque, not just his recipes on a menu. His heart was in those walls. The walls that now stood polished and hollow without him. Elena turned to the manager, who still hadn't moved. "You asked him to leave," she said. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of a verdict. "You assumed he was begging. You couldn't even look him in the eye." The manager swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I didn't know. You didn't care," she interrupted, not raising her voice, but cutting deeper than a shout. "That's worse." The other diners didn't know what to do. Some stared. Others looked away, suddenly fascinated by the garnish on their plates. A few pulled out their phones, unsure whether to record or retreat. Then, someone stood up. A woman, older, white hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her linen scarf fluttered slightly in the breeze. She stepped forward, slowly, and said, "I remember you. James Carter. You taught my son at the community cooking class 15 years ago. He said you changed his life." James looked at her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Boy with a crooked nose. Never could flip an omelet," she laughed. "That's the one." More silence. Then another voice. "Wait, you're that James Carter?" a man said from the corner table. "Didn't you start Lucien's?" Elena raised her chin. "Yes, and they erased him." James pulled his hand from hers gently and sat back down on the bench. His knees ached, and the weight of the moment felt heavy. "It's all right," he said softly. "I didn't want to be found." Elena knelt beside him again, wiping her tears. "But I did. I searched for years. You never came home. I thought you died." "I did," he said simply. "Just not in the way you think." That line, soft, poetic, and devastating, hung in the air behind them. The door to Lucien's opened again. A younger man in a dark suit stepped out. Not the manager this time, but someone from corporate. He looked at Elena, then at James. "I'm sorry," he said. "If we'd known, you wouldn't have treated him any differently," Elena snapped. "And that's the problem." There it was. The truth no one wanted to face. The idea that human decency had a filter, and that filter, too often, was wrapped in a coat, or a skin color, or a balance sheet. James looked up at his daughter. His eyes, once clouded with detachment, now brimmed with something warmer. "Grief, yes, but also pride. You grew into her," he said quietly. "Into who?" she asked. "Into your mother." That broke her. For a moment, Elena just cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just deep, aching sobs that had waited too long for release. Her mother had been the glue, the joy, the song in their home. When she passed, something cracked in both of them, but only Elena had found a way to keep moving forward. A breeze swept across the patio. James pulled the beanie from his lap and handed it to her. "Your mother knitted that," he said. "For you. But I kept it." Elena took it like it was sacred. "I'll never let you go again," she whispered. He smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." People began to disperse, conversations resuming, but softer now, more thoughtful. A few servers exchanged glances, suddenly questioning their own routines. The manager disappeared inside, and no one seemed to miss him. Father and daughter stayed outside a while longer, the sun low now, casting golden light across the tile. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Sometimes, love sounds loudest in silence. As the evening crept in, Elena pulled out her phone, not to take a picture, but to cancel the board meeting. Some things were more important. Inside Lucien's, no one noticed that a menu had been left on the table near the door, fluttering slightly in the wind. But outside, a new chapter had just begun. Later that evening, after the sun had slipped behind the skyline, and the last of the Lucien's diners had filtered out. James Carter sat at a small table inside his daughter's apartment, holding a warm mug of ginger tea. The cup trembled slightly. In his hands, not from weakness, but from the disorientation of being inside again, being welcomed again. It felt like trying to walk after years of crawling. Alina sat across from him on a worn couch, her suit jacket tossed over the armrest. Her bare feet curled under her. The apartment was modest but elegant. A few family photos hung on the wall, though James noticed that none of them included him. Understandable. He hadn't been in the picture, literally or metaphorically, for nearly a decade. He looked at her now, studying her face the way a sculptor might study a statue he'd once started but never finished. She was grown, hardened in some ways, sharper, but there was still a softness in her eyes when she looked at him. Still the girl who used to sit at the counter while he stirred sundae. Stu, asking if she could be the one to sprinkle the basil. "You live nice," he said. Alina gave a short laugh. "I live fine. You got that from your mama," James added. "She always said we don't need big to feel full. Just good light and food that means something." Alina's smile faded slightly. She would have been heartbroken to see. "What happened to you?" James sipped the tea. She already saw the beginning of it. She knew when they started cutting me out of meetings. When they stopped calling it my kitchen and started calling it theirs. She saw it. That's why she made me promise not to fight. But why? Alina asked, leaning forward, frustration slipping into her voice. "Why didn't you fight them? Why didn't you tell me? Or the public?" James looked down at the tea. The reflection of the kitchen lights shimmered across the surface. "Because I was tired," he said. "Tired of proving myself to people who only saw my skin, not my soul. And because ... After your mother passed, I didn't have it in me anymore. Not the will. Not the fire. But they stole your name, Dad," Alina said, her voice rising just enough to tremble. "They stole everything you built." James looked up, eyes heavy. "They didn't steal everything. They didn't steal you." Those words quieted her. She leaned back into the couch, breathing deeply. "I spent years looking for you. Hired people. Checked shelters. Even got scammed once by a guy who said he found you in exchange for money. I was so desperate, I believed him." "I'm sorry," James said. "No," she shook her head. "I'm just glad I found you before it was too late." James shifted in his chair. "So tell me, what do you do now? You in-law like your uncle?" "I'm a lawyer, yeah. Intellectual property." James raised an eyebrow. "Ain't that something? So you fight to make sure other people don't lose their names." "Exactly," she said, a small, bitter smile curving her lips. "And I've been building a case for you." James froze. "What?" "I've been collecting documents for years. Financial records. Contract copies. Shareholder minutes. Your original co-founder agreement with Lucien's. The one Mom helped type up before it went public." James stared at her, not breathing. Alina leaned forward again, voice steady now. "They thought those papers were gone. They never expected me to find the microfilm, or the signature discrepancies, or the fact that your shares were never legally transferred because they tricked you into signing a document that wasn't notarized." "Alina," he began. She held up her hand. "I don't care about the money. I don't even care about the brand. What I care about is the truth. You didn't disappear because you failed. You disappeared because they erased you. I want people to know that." For a long moment, James didn't say anything. He looked away toward the window, where distant city lights blinked like stars too far away to reach. "I didn't think anyone would still believe me," he said. "I didn't need to believe you," Alina said softly. "I knew you." Tears welled in James's eyes, but he blinked them away. The next morning, the world started changing. Elena didn't waste time. She called a meeting with the current board of Lucien's, a group of 6 men and 2 women, all in their 40s and 50s, dressed in sharp suits and practiced smiles. They didn't know who she was at first, but when she stated her name, their faces shifted. The conference room was all glass and marble, perched on the 37th floor of the downtown high-rise that bore Lucien's logo on the awning. She stood, the head of the table, folders neatly arranged in front of her. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't flinch. She wasn't here to plead. She was here to present. "My name is Elena Carter," she said. "You may not know me, but you should. I'm the daughter of James Carter, your original founder." Murmurs began. One man leaned forward. "I thought Mr. Carter resigned years ago?" "He did not," Elena said sharply. "What he did was disappear, because this board conspired to cut him out." She opened the first folder. "Here's his original equity agreement. Never nullified, never sold, never bought out." Another folder. "Here's the false agreement you claimed he signed. You'll notice it lacks notarization. That makes it legally invalid." Another folder. "Here's a breakdown of the profits since 2014, which still includes several recipes credited to House Original, which are, in fact, my father's." And finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. It was frayed. The leather cover cracked. She placed it gently on the table. "This," she said, "is his original recipe journal, including the notes he wrote the day before Lucien's opened. And yes, it's legally protected." One of the older board members, a man with slick gray hair and tired eyes, spoke softly. "Why are you doing this now?" "Because he's still alive," Elena replied. "Because you treated him like garbage when you thought he had nothing. And because people deserve to know who really built the empire you now sit in." The room was silent. Elena stood tall. "I'm not suing for damages. I'm not demanding money. What I want is simple. Reinstate his name as co-founder, publicly, officially, immediately." "And if we don't?" one of them asked. Elena smiled. It wasn't threatening. It was certain. "Then I go to the press, and I have everything they'll need for a story that will make headlines in 3 countries by morning." By the time she walked out of the building, they had agreed to her terms, not because they were moved, because they were afraid. That evening, James sat in her apartment again, staring at the reinstatement email on her laptop. His name was there, clear, permanent, and underneath, the new menu draft bringing back his original dishes: the soup, the bread pudding, the smoked duck with rosemary glaze. He reached out, touched the screen. "You did this?" he asked. "No," she said. "We did." Then she smiled. "And tomorrow, I'm taking you back to your kitchen." The next morning, the air outside Lucien's was cool and sharp, the kind of early autumn breeze that made you wonder if you should have brought a scarf. A silver SUV pulled up slowly along the curb, and out stepped James Carter, wearing a fresh, pressed button-up shirt, clean jeans, and the same worn beanie folded gently in his pocket. His shoes were still old, but now polished. Elena walked beside him, her arm lightly touching his. She didn't guide him. He didn't need that. But she was there, steady, visible, unapologetic. As they approached the restaurant, the hostess glanced up, and for a split second, confusion flickered across her face, followed by something that looked like guilt. She recognized him. She had to. The internet had exploded the night before. The headlines were everywhere. Lucien's founding chef rediscovered. Living on the street's daughter reclaims legacy. The man who created the menu everyone profited from and then was erased. A local reporter had picked up the story from a legal blog that covered intellectual property. It had gone viral within hours. Tweets, TikToks, stitched reaction videos. The story had everything. Betrayal, redemption, and a father-daughter bond that refused to break. Now James Carter wasn't just a forgotten name in the foundation of a restaurant. He was a symbol dot, and he hated that part. I'm not here for a photo, he muttered, as they stepped onto the patio where it all started. Alina smiled. I know, but you need to be seen. On your terms. They stepped through the door glass, polished, automatic. It made no sound, but still felt loud. James paused. The smells hit him first. A mix of butter, thyme, garlic, and something he couldn't name anymore, but had once known like his own heartbeat. Then the voices. Someone dropped a spoon in the kitchen. Another voice whispered, That's him. James took a slow breath. Then walked in. The manager from the other day, the one who had tried to kick him off the property, was waiting. His hair was still slick, but his posture had changed. Less like a man in charge, more like someone awaiting judgment. Mr. Carter, he began. I want to sincerely apologize for... James held up a hand. Don't, he said calmly. Not yet. Not until you mean it. The man opened his mouth, closed it again. Alina stood beside her father, quiet but firm. She wasn't going to speak. For him, this was his space now. His voice, one by one, employees filtered out from the kitchen. Some young, some older. A few James recognized, though time had softened their faces and hardened their eyes. A few whispered greetings. One young cook even stepped forward and offered his hand. I started cooking because of your soup recipe, he said. I know. It's yours. It was the first thing I ever made that made my mom cry. James shook his hand. You know the secret? The boy grinned. Cayenne. Just a pinch. Not bad, James said. The moment loosened something in the room. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the first crack in the wall. Then something unexpected happened. The hostess, the same one who'd ignored him days before, stepped forward. She looked young, no older than 23. Brown curls tied back, hands visibly shaking. I didn't see you, she said quietly. Not really. I judged you. I'm sorry. James looked at her for a long moment. You saw what you were taught to see, he said. Now you're learning something different. That matters. Behind them, the doors opened again. Cameras, reporters. And in the middle of them all stood Lucien himself, or rather, the man who now owned the largest stake in the restaurant chain. Victor Grayson. Tall, crisp gray suit. The kind of smile that usually meant deals, not feelings. He stepped forward, hand extended. James, he said, like they were old friends reunited. James didn't shake it. Victor's smile faltered for the first time. I wanted to apologize in person. We were younger then. Business was complicated. I made decisions I regret. Name one, James said. Victor paused. Removing your name. That's not what you regret, James replied. You regret getting caught. Alina shifted, but didn't interrupt. Her father wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. There's a difference. Victor cleared his throat. I'd like to offer you a permanent space on our board again, publicly, and a generous compensation package. James chuckled. You still talk like a man who thinks money fixes everything. Victor's jaw tightened. I don't want a seat, James said. I don't want a check. What I want is truth on that wall. He pointed to the restaurant's Founders section near the entrance, a sleek silver plaque listing Victor and two other partners. His name was nowhere to be found. Victor hesitated. That can be arranged. No, James said. That can be restored. Big difference. The word hung in the air. And then applause. Soft, slow, uncertain at first, but it grew. Not because it was a grand speech. Not because it was theatrical, but because it was right. And people still knew how to recognize right, if you gave them the chance. Victor didn't clap, but he nodded and left. Alina and James stayed for lunch, not in a private booth someone offered, but at a corner table near the kitchen. The same kitchen he once ran with a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. He didn't want fanfare. He wanted food. A server brought him a bowl of his original soup. Tomato, carrot, sweet onion. Creamy, but not heavy. Balanced, like memory. A spoon. James took a bite. Closed his eyes. Still got it, he said. The server grinned. We didn't touch the recipe. Good, James said. 'Cause it doesn't belong to you. He and Alina talked about nothing and everything, her work, his time in shelters, old recipes, forgotten friends. It was awkward in places. Tender in others. But it was real. When they finished, James stood to leave. But before they exited, he walked up to the wall again. The manager was already there, plaque in hand, nervously adjusting it. James stepped forward and took the screwdriver. He said, I started this place with my hands. Let me fix it with them too. He screwed in the plate himself. No ceremony, no flash. Just quiet clicks. And then he stepped back. It read, James Carter, co-founder, executive chef, father of Lucien. Smiled. That's better. 3 days later, Alina stood in the towering glass atrium of the Lucien's corporate headquarters, waiting for the elevator to arrive. She wore a dark gray suit, this time less elegant, more firm. Her hair was pulled into a clean, low bun. No jewelry, no distractions. Just the documents in her black leather portfolio and the quiet conviction in her chest. She wasn't here to settle a grudge. She was here to deliver a reckoning. Across the city, James Carter sat on a bench outside a community kitchen in the Bronx, sharing stories with an apprentice chef and handing out bread bowls to a line of unhoused neighbors. He had politely declined to come along. This part ain't mine, he told Alina that morning. It's yours. I already did my fighting. But Alina knew better. He hadn't fought that day years ago when he'd been cornered out of the company he built. So now she would do it for him. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. 17 floors up, the executive conference room looked out over the city like a throne carved from glass and steel. 8 board members were already seated, arranged, like pieces on a very expensive chessboard. At the head sat Victor Grayson, still immaculate in his suit, though his eyes had lost some of their smug shimmer. Perhaps it was fatigue. Or maybe, for the first time, he was bracing for something. He couldn't negotiate away. Ms. Carter, he greeted, with the kind of rehearsed calm you expect from someone who used to be on the debate team. Welcome back. Alina didn't smile. She didn't even sit. She walked to the head of the table, set her portfolio down, and opened it slowly, deliberately, like a surgeon revealing the truth beneath the skin. I'd like this meeting on record, she began. And I've brought an independent legal observer to ensure it stays that way. From behind her stepped a tall black woman in a blazer and flats, holding a small recording device. She offered no small talk, just nodded, then sat near the window. Victor frowned. Is that really necessary? Yes, Alina replied. Since the last time this company recorded anything about my father, it was an unsigned, false agreement. That conveniently erased him. The air grew tighter. Alina continued. As I previously stated, I have compiled documentation that shows not only James Carter's legal role as co-founder and executive chef of Lucien's, but also the unlawful manipulation of voting rights used to push him out. She began laying documents on the table, one by one. First, the original articles of incorporation, with James's name clearly listed. Then, the bylaw revisions made 2 years after the company went public, revisions that had been pushed through. in a late-night session with only majority shareholders present. Next, emails, screenshots, meeting notes. It wasn't flashy. It was airtight. And here, she said, sliding across the final piece, is a voice memo your former VP of operations left on my father's answering machine 2 days before his resignation. He admitted he knew the vote to remove Mr. Carter was fraudulent. He just didn't want to lose his severance package. Victor leaned forward, trying not to react. But the other board members were already shifting in their chairs. You could see the discomfort spreading like ink in water. One of the women leaned over to whisper something to her colleague, but Alina spoke before they could finish. You can try to blame the past. You can point to old business practices, gray areas, or shifting leadership. But none of that will matter when the Department of Labor starts its investigation, or when the press starts asking why your founding chef was listed as homeless on his last tax form while this company posted record profits. Ms. Carter. Victor interrupted, his voice low, controlled. Let's not pretend you're here purely for justice. You're a lawyer. You know how to negotiate. What do you want? Alina didn't blink. I want his name restored on every single official record, internal and public, she said. I want a formal apology from this board, written and published. I want full back pay for the years he was owed his share of profits. And I want 10% of all future profits from the James Carter signature menu to be donated to culinary programs for underserved youth. In his name, not yours. The room fell silent. Victor looked around the table. One board member nodded slowly. Another looked away, but didn't object. A third, an older woman in navy, cleared her throat. I worked with James Carter, she said, back when Lucien's was just one restaurant in at least corner unit. I remember the way he treated his staff. He knew every dishwasher's name, knew their kids' birthdays. And when we went national, they told us it was too risky to keep him out front. That he didn't look corporate enough. She looked down. I didn't fight it. I should have. Alina met her gaze. No anger. Just acknowledgement. Victor leaned back in his chair. He looked at Alina as if seeing her for the first time, not as a legal threat, but as a force. And if we agree to this, then I make sure the story is about redemption, she said, not betrayal. He was silent for a long time, and finally nodded. Double quotes. Fine, he said. Let's draw it up. But Alina didn't move. She pulled out one last item from her folder, a framed photograph. It was a candid shot of her father in 1997, standing in the original Lucien's kitchen, flour on his apron, laughing mid-joke. Next to him, a young Alina, maybe 8 years old, stood on a milk crate, helping him stir a pot. She placed it at the center of the table. I'm not just here as a lawyer, she said. I'm here as his daughter, and I won't let you forget what he gave you. Later, as she exited the boardroom, a few members stood to shake her hand. She nodded politely, but didn't linger. She wasn't here for thanks. Downstairs, the lobby echoed with quiet footsteps as she walked outside. The sky was overcast now, soft clouds hanging low. The city moved around her: cars, cabs, people on phones. But for a moment, it all seemed still. James was sitting at a cafe across the street, sipping something out of a chipped ceramic mug. No one bothered him. No one stared. He looked normal, like just another person in a city full of stories. Crossed the street and sat beside him. Well? He asked, not looking up. You're back in, she said. Officially, permanently. No loopholes, no conditions. James nodded. Then smiled. Good, he said. Now let's eat. The first camera crew arrived at dawn. They rolled up in a dusty white van with a faded logo from a local affiliate station, parked half-crooked across the street from the community kitchen, and immediately began unpacking gear like they were reporting from a war zone. A young producer with too much caffeine in her system ran across the sidewalk holding a clipboard, already barking instructions. But James Carter didn't notice any of it. He was too busy chopping onions. Inside the kitchen, the windows fogged slightly with the heat of the stove. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic, and the sound of boiling water harmonized with the rustling of plastic aprons and the shuffle of sneakers on old tile. James moved like a man who had never stopped cooking, even if the world had stopped. Watching Dot next to him, a boy no older than 17 stood frozen with a paring knife in hand. James glanced over. "You crying 'cause of the onions or 'cause you're afraid to cut 'em?" he asked with a raised brow. Dot, the boy laughed, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Little bit of both." "Well, let's fix one of those," James said, gently guiding his hand. "See, you hold the tip of the knife down, then rock like a seesaw. Don't fight the onion, work with it." Outside, the media frenzy was building. The sidewalk was now lined with tripods and wireless mics, some from major networks. A woman in heels that weren't made for concrete kept trying to smooth her hair between gusts of wind. A man with a lapel mic rehearsed lines into his phone. The founder who vanished, the daughter who brought him back. Culinary justice served hot, but none of them had been there when it mattered. Not when James lost his name. Not when he spent winters on subway platforms and summers in borrowed beds. Not when Alina stayed up night after night, combing through old paper trails and fighting off hopelessness, with nothing but a lawyer's instinct and a daughter's faith. Press had come now, but not for the truth. They came for the headline. Inside, the morning shift was nearly done. Dozens of bowls had already been served to unhoused guests, tired parents, and kids in oversized jackets. Every single one of them got a full portion, and a smile, and a name remembered, even if it was just Sir or Sweetheart or Isle. "See you next week." James wiped his hands on a towel and looked out the front window, catching sight of the growing media crowd. "They're gonna want you to talk," said Melinda, the kitchen coordinator, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp wit and arms strong from lifting stockpots for 20 years. "You ready for that?" James shook his head slowly. "I don't talk to folks who only show up for the finish line." Melinda snorted. "Well, you better get used to it, Mr. Carter. You're famous now." He rolled his eyes. "I was famous. Once didn't do me no good." Just then, the door opened and Alina walked in. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie far from the courtroom armor she'd worn a few days ago. But her presence still commanded attention. She carried a tote bag over her shoulder, and in her hand was a small takeout container. "Brought you lunch," she said, smiling. "And don't say you already ate, because I know you've been feeding everyone but yourself." James raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He took the box and peeked inside mac and cheese, green beans, and cornbread. His favorite, you remember. "I paid attention," she said. They sat down at a corner table, where a view of the street gave them a clear picture of the circus. Outside, Alina glanced at the reporters and back at her father. "They're waiting for you," she said. "I know. Any chance you'll talk to them?" "Maybe," he said, "but not today." Alina leaned back. "I don't blame you." James took a bite of the mac and cheese, chewed slowly, then looked at her. "You know what they're going to ask, right? They'll want the sob story, the fall from grace, the comeback. Then they'll turn me into a hashtag, and next week they'll have, be on to the next broken hero. You're more than that." "I know," he said. "But do they?" They sat in silence for a moment, watching as a woman from Channel 9 gestured wildly at her cameraman. He seemed confused by the reflection. On the glass, James set his fork down and turned back to Alina. "What you did for me. That was everything. But you know the best part?" She tilted her head. "What? You didn't do it for the cameras." You didn't even do it for the headlines. You did it 'cause you remembered who I was when no one else did." Her eyes softened. "You are never forgotten. Just misplaced." James chuckled. "Well, you found me." They heard a knock on the window. One of the reporters had spotted them. A young woman, probably an intern, held up a sign scrawled in marker. "Just one quote?" James stood up, walked to the door, opened it halfway. The girl stepped forward eagerly. "Mr. Carter, He held up a hand. "No sound bites," he said. "But you can come in, have lunch, talk to people, learn something that don't fit in a headline." She hesitated. "You mean eat here?" "Yes," he said. "You can't understand a kitchen like this unless you break bread with it." She blinked, then slowly nodded. I'd like that." Behind her, the other reporters didn't know what to do. Some looked confused, others annoyed. But a few started stepping forward, without microphones, without cameras. Just curiosity. Just people. James stepped back inside, looked at Alina. "That's how we changed the story," he said. And that's what they did. By noon, the dining room was filled not with noise, but with warmth. Reporters sat beside regulars. Politicians shook hands with volunteers. And in the corner, James Carter taught a teenage boy how to season stew without overthinking it. Later that day, one article would go viral, not from a major outlet, but from a food blog run by a former line cook. The headline read, "He never asked to be seen, but they saw him anyway." And beneath it was a picture, not of James Carter standing on a stage, not of Alina in court, but of the two of them, sitting side by side in a kitchen filled with steam and laughter, eating cornbread, with their fingers and looking like the whole world finally made sense again. It was a Friday evening when Lucien's reopened under its original name, Lucien's by Carter. The rebrand had taken less than a week, but the change went deeper than just signage or font choices. The restaurant had stripped away the sterile minimalism of its recent years. Now the lobby smelled faintly of cedar and citrus. The lights were warmer, the linen softer, the music a gentle rhythm of acoustic jazz instead of abstract ambient tones. But the most noticeable difference wasn't the ambiance. It was what waited at every table. Each place setting, arranged with meticulous care, held a small folded card no bigger than a coaster. On the outside, embossed in gold foil, were the words, "Please read before you taste." Inside, the card read, "You don't know who's sitting across from you. Not yet. Look closer." This restaurant exists because of a man who was ignored, who once sat on this very patio and was told he didn't belong. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't demand to be seen. But his hands built this menu. His soul shaped this kitchen. And now his name is back where it belongs. The Carter family. For some guests, the card sparked awkward glances and hushed conversation. For others, it sparked something else, curiosity, or maybe even humility. One older couple held hands across their table and nodded, quietly moved. A young woman wiped her eyes before her date could see at table 6. A regular Mr. Franklin, who'd eaten at Lucien's every other week for 12 years, read the card 3 times before finally whispering to his wife, "I think we dined here the night that man was on the terrace. We just walked by him." His wife didn't answer. She just folded the card and slipped it into her purse, like it was something sacred. In the kitchen, James stood quietly behind the line, not in charge, not shouting orders, just observing. The new executive chef, Darren, was a 28-year-old black culinary school grad who had grown up admiring James's cooking from YouTube clips and archived articles. When he saw James, he nearly dropped a ladle the first day. "I can't believe you're even here," he had said. James replied, "I'm not here to haunt this kitchen. I'm here to make sure it still has a soul. Tonight, James wore a clean black apron with his name stitched into the corner, not embroidered like a trophy, but hand-sewn by one of the line cooks, Maria, who had stayed after hours to do it. Kitchen buzzed with energy, but not the stressful kind. It felt like a heartbeat, steady, familiar, alive. James walked from station to station, nodding encouragement, offering the occasional taste test or reminder. You're pouring, not painting. He told one server pouring sauce onto a plate. Don't be afraid of salt, be afraid of being forgettable, he whispered to a nervous prep cook. Good food doesn't need apology, he said when someone hesitated over plating a dish. He wasn't there for show. He was there for the craft. Meanwhile, Alina sat at the chef's table, an open counter area now converted into a place of honor for friends, family, and local community leaders. She didn't say much, just watched her father in his element. There was something about seeing him not as the man she had searched for, not as the figure on headlines, but simply as who he had always been. A man who found peace in a perfect mirepoix, who communicated more through flavor than words. Across from her sat Mrs. Enos, a retired school principal from Harlem, and one of James's old friends. She looked at Alina with teary eyes. I always knew he'd come back, she said. Alina smiled. Honestly, I didn't. Mrs. Enos reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Doesn't matter who believed. What matters is who stood up, and you did? Then the lights dimmed slightly, just enough to signal the evening's featured dish was about to begin. The Founder's Stew. A hearty bowl of tomato-based oxtail stew with buttered corn fritters and black-eyed pea slaw. It was the dish James first cooked when Lucien's opened its doors in 1994. Now returned to the menu with full credit and the original handwritten recipe framed on the wall near the kitchen pass-through. Every single bowl was served with a spoon and a second card. Not for reading, but for writing. Each card was blank, except for one prompt at the top. Who have you misjudged? Guests were encouraged to leave a note, anonymous or signed, and slip it into the Blackwood letterbox near the exit. Some wrote short apologies. Some wrote full paragraphs. Some wrote nothing, but carried the card home. By the end of the night, the box was full. James didn't read them that night. He simply stood by the door, thanking people as they left. Some hugged him. Some cried. Some simply nodded, too moved to speak. No cameras. No flashes. Just quiet reverence. Near closing time, the door opened one last time, and in walked the hostess from the day he'd been shamed on the patio. The same young woman who had once looked through him like he was invisible. She carried a single plate. On it sat one slice of pecan pie, the original recipe, his wife's recipe. She walked up to him and held it out. I found it in the old archives, she said. The handwritten one? I made it. I hope it's right. James looked at the slice, then at her. He didn't say anything. Just took a bite, chewed, closed his eyes. It's close, he said. She exhaled sharply, almost crying. But you're missing something, he added. She nodded, looking crushed. What? He smiled gently. She always used a little orange zest in the crust. Makes it brighter. The young woman laughed, embarrassed and relieved all at once. James picked up a clean plate and handed it to her. Come back next week. Bring it again. She nodded. I will. Then she turned to leave. But before she stepped outside, she pulled something from her apron pocket and placed it in the letterbox. The restaurant emptied slowly. The staff cleaned with extra care, music still playing softly in the background. James took off his apron and walked over to the wall, where his framed recipe hung beside a newly installed plaque with his story simple, powerful, and true. He didn't need to read it. He was it. Alina walked up behind him. She leaned against the wall, tired but full in the way only moments like this can fill you. You know, she said, I think this is what Mom would have wanted. James nodded. She always said food was forgiveness in a bowl. They stood in silence, watching the candles on each table slowly flicker out. And for the first time in a long time, there was peace. Real, earned, humble peace. James Carter never returned to the spotlight, not in the way the media kept hoping for. He didn't host a cooking show, didn't sign a book deal, although 3 publishers tried, didn't agree to have a dish named after him at every Lucien's location, even though Alina offered. Food shouldn't be branded like cologne, he'd said. Just make it honest. Let the taste speak. He went back to what he loved most, cooking with intention and being useful without fanfare. Most mornings, he took the D train down to the Bronx to help prep meals at the community kitchen. Some days, he stopped at a local high school culinary program where he taught knife skills to teenagers who had never been told they were good at anything. Other times, he'd show up unannounced at Lucien's and quietly watch the line cooks, giving them nods or subtle corrections, not as a boss, but as a witness to their work. The world had changed around him, but he remained steady, like an oak. In the middle of a city sidewalk, weathered, solid, hard to ignore once you noticed. On Sundays, without fail, he and Alina shared dinner together at his small rent-stabilized apartment above a laundromat in Harlem. They'd eat by the window, nothing fancy, usually something humble and warm. Roast chicken, gumbo, split pea soup. Alina often brought dessert from a bakery she liked down the block, though James insisted hers were better. She'd always reply, I learned from the best. One Sunday evening, a soft knock came at his door. James wiped his hands on a towel and opened it to find a man in his early 30s standing there with his son. The man wore a worn UPS jacket. The boy held a Tupperware dish. You probably don't remember me, the man said nervously. I worked for you in the first Lucien's, back of house, night shift. My name's Malek. James squinted, then smiled slowly. Malek, burnt the rice twice in 1 week. Malek laughed. Guilty. But you didn't fire me. You stayed late and made me recook it until I got it right. James nodded. I remember. You had the hands for it, you just didn't know it yet. Malek grew serious. You changed my life. I was headed in the wrong direction. I got my CDL after that job. Now I drive full-time. This is my son, CJ. CJ stepped forward. We brought cornbread. My dad says it's your favorite. James took the dish, humbled. It is. Thank you. After they left, he sat with Alina at the table, spooning cornbread into bowls of black-eyed peas. You never really know who you're cooking for, he said. Alina smiled. That's the thing about legacy, Dad. It sneaks up on you. Weeks passed. Then months. The media attention died down, as it always does. The buzz moved on to newer stories, flashier headlines. But the ripple James had left remained. Lucien's reported the highest customer satisfaction scores in company history. Applications to culinary scholarships under the Carter Initiative tripled. At the community kitchen, volunteers began showing up before the shift even started. Some were inspired by the story. Others just wanted to be part of something that made them feel whole. One foggy morning in December, James sat on a bench outside the kitchen, sipping from a thermos. Bastine curled up like smoke from an old record player. His hands were rough, from years of labor, but steady. His beanie still gray, still folded neatly, rested in his lap. A girl passed by, no older than 16, earbuds in, hoodie too big for her shoulders. She paused when she saw him. Are you the chef guy? He raised an eyebrow. Guess that depends which one you mean. The one they wrote the story about. The daughter lawyer and the restaurant and all that. He smiled. I've been called worse. She bit her lip, awkward. They made us read it in school. The article. I liked it. Thanks. She turned to go, then stopped. It made me think about my dad. I haven't seen him since I was little. He's not like you. But I think maybe I judged him too fast. James nodded. We all do that sometimes. She looked down at her shoes. Do you think people can come back? James thought for a moment. Looked out at the street, where cars slid past like slow-moving memories. I think people don't really leave, he said. They just wait until someone's willing to see them again. She nodded, quietly, then walked away. That night, Alina visited him again. She brought soup, his mother's recipe, in a stack of envelopes. What's this? He asked, eyeing them like overdue bills. Letters, she said. From the plate cards. He frowned. I thought we weren't going to read those, she shrugged. I peeked at a few. I think you should see what people said. He hesitated, then opened the top one. To the man I passed on the street and thought was invisible. I see you now. And I'll try harder to see others too. The next, I judged my neighbor for his accent. Tonight, I shared a table with a stranger who taught me more in 30 minutes than I've learned all year. Another, your story made me call my dad. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. Thank you. James stopped after the fifth one. It was enough. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled. I didn't ask for this, he said. I know, Alina replied. But you earned it. Then she pulled something from her coat pocket, a small wooden sign. She handed it to him without a word. It read, Welcome to Carter's Kitchen, where every dish has a story. James read it, ran his thumb across the O. Grooves. Smiled. And whispered, Yeah, that feels right. In the spring, the community kitchen held a fundraiser gala. Nothing flashy, folding chairs, local jazz band, paper plates. But it was packed. Alumni, chefs, teachers, elders. All of them linked by one man, whose only ambition had been to cook meals that made people feel like they mattered. James sat in the back, away from the main table. Halfway through the event, they called his name. He didn't want to go, but Alina nudged him, and when he stood, the whole room rose with him. He didn't give a speech, just a quiet thank you. I never needed to be famous, he said. I just needed to be remembered by the right people. And they did. They always would. James Carter passed away quietly 5 years later in his sleep, a cookbook in his lap, and stew simmering on the stove. At his funeral, there were no marble statues, no black tie eulogies, but there were hundreds of people, cooks, kids, strangers, students, veterans, lawyers, dishwashers, who stood up one by one and told a story of a moment when James made them feel seen. And on the back of the funeral program was a quote. He never asked to be seen, but when we finally looked, we saw everything. Asterisk, he never raised his voice, never asked to be noticed. But in the quiet, he reminded everyone what real worth looks like. Not in money, not in title, but in character, in history, in love. They saw a coat. She saw a father. And maybe now, the world will see him too. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing. Because the world is full of voices like his. And here, we make sure they're heard.